There had been tougher individual moments in my life. There had been times where I had been more fearful for my life. But to be put in the situation I was put in completely different circumstances over such a long, prolonged period of time, I was either going to look back and think, that's it, I've had the experience, I don't want to do that again, or I was going to get the bug and I was going to want to do more, and I was going to want to pursue the world of extreme expeditions.
Hi Baz, Foxy here, just wishing you luck prior to your 80 miles for 80 years of British Commando forces, all in aid and support of the Royal Marines charity, which is massively important as they support past, present and obviously the future Royal Marines to come. So mate, good effort, good luck, and be thinking about you.
Baz, how are you, brother?
Really well, Chris. Great to talk to you, mate. I haven't seen you for quite a while with this what's going on stuff, mate. So, yeah, it's great to see your face, mate.
Yes, and yours too. And how do we feel about tomorrow?
I'm ready. I'm a bit like you, mate. I sort of decided to do this quite late, but fortunately, I do look after myself and do quite a lot of running anyway. My escape tends to be getting out onto the moors near where I live. So I've really knuckled down and focused on doing this run over the last couple of weeks properly. Probably not the sort of length of time you should be giving yourself to lead into an 80-mile run, but hey ho, I'm here. Yeah, I'm injury free. I'm feeling fit, and I think we're just going to go and do this thing tomorrow, mate. It should be good.
Brilliant. So, first off, massive well done, Baz. This doesn't surprise me, but I guess for our friends at home and our brothers and sisters in the military community, let me just say a few things. So, Baz is a former regimental sergeant major from the Royal Marines Commandos, also a mountain leader. So someone who's an expert in everything outdoors, really. So all the climbing, the Arctic warfare, the amphibious assaults, all this kind of stuff, which we will come on to. Baz was a massive support to me when I ran the length of the country in 2018. Actually drove all the way to Scotland just to run for one day with me. Which was, this is the kind of bootneck spirit, Baz, isn't it, that we like to share about.
That's why I think we use the word family more than any other sort of force out there, really. And in the Royal Marines, as you know, mate, it absolutely is about, brother, sister, wife, daughter, son. It's a family. It's a family group, and once you're in it, you're in it. And we go way out of our way. Not necessarily out of our way, but we will pull out all the stops to support our oppos when they're when we think they need it, mate. And I think that's what I love about the Royal Marines.
So just to quote our good friend Jay Wilcox, massively talented photographer that both Baz and I know. Again, Jay helped me on my run. But Jay says if he ever thinks about your typical roughy, toughy Royal Marines Commando who represents all of our commando values, so that's your loyalty, your cheerfulness under adversity, bravery, all these kind of things. He says, just think Baz Gray. So probably the highest accolade you can get, mate. Hey.
That's very nice. Jason's actually come down again, mate, to support this run. He's another one of those guys who drives the length of the country to support a mate. So he's with me now in my house, and and he's going to be, my support, collecting all the photographs and images, and just being there as he normally is over the next sort of 24 hours. So yeah, big out to Jay. He's a great guy.
You better keep him off the beer today then, mate.
Yeah, we might have had a glass of wine last night, mate, but but why not?
Yeah, good effort, Jay. Good effort. So the challenge tomorrow is to run 80 miles across Dartmoor's rough terrain.
Yep.
Dartmoor being a historic training, along with Scotland, obviously, but Dartmoor being a historic training ground for the Royal Marines.
And the modern one that they use today, yeah.
And it's 80 miles. What is the significance of the 80, Baz?
So 1940, the then Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, was dealing with a little problem in Europe. And he wanted to try and, upset certain parts of that little problem by creating little small scale, well trained, hard as nuts, little raiding forces. And he decided then that he needed this new force to be raised as soon as possible, and they were to be known as Commandos. And that's where the term in the British forces, Commandos, started in June 1940. It was 1942 when the Royal Marines were actually given the title Commandos, and the first Royal Marine specific commando title stepped up. But it was 1940, 80 years ago, that Commandos in the British forces began. I've spent 26 years of those 80 as one of those Commandos. So the distance is 1 mile for every year of existence of the Commando forces to celebrate the amazing things that they've done globally in support of this country. So it's about me recognizing that milestone. And the reason I'm doing it now is I always begin my build up to the winter season, to the big expeditions that come up around October, November, December, this time of year. Last year I did a huge run along the Southwest Coast Path. This year I'm deciding to do this, and it sort of kicks me mentally into my proper training program from here on up until October. So I've just put the two things together to try and raise a few quid and a bit of money and a bit of a bit of understanding about who we are, what we do, and the situation we're in at the moment. So that's how it all started, mate.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned when I was up there at Speen Bridge, which is where the Commando Memorial is, as I ran past it, I specifically went out of my way down the west coast, wasn't it, Baz? So I could...
Yeah, you've got to, haven't you? You couldn't run past that and not pop in.
So I paid my respects there, and I think one of the things I said in my kind of Facebook video was these young men were often parachuted in behind enemy lines, for example, up there in Norway to attack the German installations.
Yeah.
And they were basically suicide. Many of them were suicide missions. They knew there was a good chance that they wouldn't come back, and yet, they still, to a man, all raised their hand and volunteered.
I mean, there's some remarkable stories from those days right up until the modern day now, mate. You sign up and give yourself that tag commando, then you're not going to be in for an easy ride if you're sent operationally to deploy anywhere. You're going to be sought after by the command, sought after by the leaders. If they've got a difficult task on their hands, and they've got a group of men tagged as commandos, then that's who they want on the ground. So they're very often thrust into the most difficult and problematic situations first, which means the ratio of life to death is probably higher than any other force that you come across in those situations. And the Royal Marines certainly have been hit really hard and played their part over the last 20 years for sure.
So I'm just conscious of people that haven't got time to watch our whole podcast, Baz. Let's give the details of where they can find you and how can they get involved. Right,
so it's a new group we formed called the Outdoor Athlete Community. So we've got a website, www.outdoorathlete.co.uk. You can go onto the website and look for the event Baz's Commando 80 Miler. The Outdoor Athlete Community Facebook page is going to be following the story almost live. I'll be doing sort of every 10-mile live updates, little sort of chats and stuff like that. So you can follow it all on there. There's route maps on there if people want to come out and join in on and find me. be more than welcome. And there's all links to the Just Giving page, and I'm sure we'll talk about why we're raising funds and money as well. But if if people want to throw a few quid in as well, all those links are on the Outdoor Athlete community. And if you're struggling around that area, which you shouldn't do, then just look up Baz Gray on Facebook, Instagram, or whatever, and you'll find me, and you'll soon find links to it.
Yeah, and I'll put all the links below the YouTube video for anybody who obviously hasn't got a pen. I'll put them below the video. Well worth tuning in, because what I found when I did my run and I was doing Facebook updates is people really got a lot out of it, so much more than I ever envisaged. And I think listening to somebody positive like Baz, who's got a good message to put out there in a very user-friendly manner, despite the fact that he's held the highest, what do we say, Baz, the highest non-commissioned position?
Yeah, that worked. The RSM is a very sort of it's one of the highlights of my life, mate. Achieving that rank. There's only ever 12 serving regimental sergeant majors in the Royal Marines, and you're selected from the crop of the best sergeant majors in the Royal Marines. There were 17 people applied for the 2 jobs that were available when I was selected, and to be picked from that caliber of people, is something that you will always look back on with immense pride. Yes.
Very well done, Baz. And so for people who are going to follow you on Facebook, you're getting probably the most humble regimental sergeant major you're ever going to meet, who's just going to tell you how it is, and for your own lives, you will get a lot out of that. And next week will be, let's say, a whole new week for you from last week. You'll have your running shoes on.
Let's hope so.
Yes. What should we talk about? Should we talk about your time in the Corps? Because a lot of the young people watching, a lot of young men in particular, will be fascinated about the Royal Marine stuff. And you are the first mountain leader that I think we've had on the show.
Okay.
How does one become? Why does someone become a mountain leader?
Well, for me, you've got to go back to sort of just your character and who you are. So it's not for everybody. I mean, Royal Marines are fit, strong people, focused people anyway. And the mountain leader branch within the Royal Marines is another step up beyond that. And it does sort of take you to another level, if you like. And there's very good reason for that. And the reason the mountain leader course is so tough is because Royal Marines specialise for the UK Armed Forces, if you like, in extremely cold weather in mountainous places. And believe it or not, conflicts are fought in extreme cold places and mountainous places. And you need to have an answer and a counter to that, which is the Royal Marine Mountain Leader branch. There's only about 70, 75 guys responsible for training all of the Royal Marines in the most extreme, arduous places on the planet. They were also then responsible for the tri-service, the Army, the Navy, the RAF, when those guys go into these real extreme environments, which they do on occasion as well. Then they would always lean on the Royal Marine Mountain Leader branch for advice, for support, and help with getting them ready to engage in those situations. So when I was a young lad in 1993, on my cold weather winter survival course in Norway, which is always done in Norway with the Royal Marines, it was the first time I really got the opportunity in the sort of 3 years I'd been in the Marines to really see and understand what the mountain leaders were about. And you either look at them during these really, really tough courses where you're just falling over, you're on your backside every 2 minutes because you can't ski and you've got a big pack on your back, and the weather's horrendous. You either look at these guys and you hate them and you can't wait to get away from them and back to being a normal Royal Marine, or you look at them and go, wow, I want to do that. And that's what I did as a young lad. And I then aspired to become a Royal Marine Mountain Leader, at some point in my career. And you can't just put your hand up as a young Marine and say, I want to do that, because you've got to be a proven leader. You've got to have been selected to be a corporal, So you have to have done your junior command course, or at least have been selected to do your junior command course. So you've got some instructional capability. You've shown leadership qualities already, because Royal Marine Mounted leaders aren't just doers. They don't just go out into the most operationally hostile environments. They also have to teach, instruct, and take people with them. There are courses I've run where I've been responsible for hundreds of students, with lesser instructors under me, and that's a huge responsibility in these environments. So you have to make sure that you're picking the right people, the right characters, right at the start of the process. Otherwise, you're not going to have the right type of person that comes out at the end. So the selection process is very demanding, it's very hard, and the course is another 8 months of just, getting absolutely smashed on the coast paths of Cornwall, all the way up to the Hardangervidda in Norway for your big final exercises towards the end. And you come out of that course a completely different person. Those that are successful are very, very high quality people. And, to spend at least, half of my career, just over half of my career serving as a mountain leader is what really made my career for me. Like I said earlier, it's not for everybody, but it was certainly for me. And I absolutely loved it. The things I've done, the places I've been, the opportunities I've had because I did that course, make me the man that's on camera today, really.
Baz, can I just say, I think you need to try not to touch the table in front of you. I can hear it.
Okay, no worries, mate.
It sounds like a volcano. To the people listening on iTunes, it'll be like this.
No problem.
Yeah, no, I can ratify that, because when we did a bit of climbing that we did in Commando training, where you go to a place called Fogging Tor on Dartmoor, we did it.
I'll be running past that on my run. That's on my route.
There we go.
Yeah,
we did that, Baz. It was kind of not fully freezing winter, but it was that kind of drizzly, horrible time that England gets a lot. And I remember we all had our gloves on, and I certainly needed a pair of gloves, right? And we were stood on top of this tor, about to abseil down the cliff or whatever it was, and the ML there, so the mountain leader, he's just there with no gloves on, and it was bitter. He's just picking at the ropes, doing these knots and making it look like he's just done these knots all his life, and roping us all up for safety. And I just remember thinking there and then, that will never be a bright. I wasn't tough enough, I just wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that environment, mate. That's me, you know me, but it's the colder the better for me. But it's not, like I say, it's not for everybody, and it doesn't mean you're not a good Royal Marine because you don't like the cold. You choose your own path. But just for the record, mate, that ML stood there was freezing his tits off, mate. He's just got, he's just learned how to not let it show. But inside the back of his mind, he's going, I've got to be hard as nails. I'm a Royal Marine Mountain leader, and they can't see me. Blah blah. There's a little bit of that in there as well, There's a bit of show. They are tough nuts, but it's.
As soon as our back was turned, he's on with his woolly his woolly mittens that his mummy's knitted.
Hot flask out.
Tell us, Baz, did you have to do that jump that they do down at Land's End or wherever it is?
Yes, I did, and we don't do it quite in the same style as they used to do it in the 40s. The jump basically is about 10 foot long from one rock, jumping downwards about 10 feet to another rock right on the edge of a cliff on Land's End in Cornwall. And the guys used to whip across this in their hobnail boots with no ropes or no protection or anything like that. And it would just be part of their morning run to hop across this rock because they were complete nutters in 1940. So we love tradition in the Royal Marines, and we love doing things that, our predecessors did. And it's just nice to be involved in the sorts of practices they got up to. And so you go and do a little bit of history, tell the story, see the jump, and we get all of the guys on the mountain leader course right near the start to do this jump. But modern day health and safety is a completely different world now. So we will stick a rope on the individuals because we can't afford to justify in the newspapers these days someone falling to their death down a cliff at Land's End. To my knowledge, no one's ever bottled it. Everyone always completes it. But in my instance, mate, it cost me a year of my career, that jump, because I broke the calcaneum in my right foot, the heel bone. And so I had to go. This was like the week 3 of an 8-month course. I'd already done what they call the pass out climb, which is a standard you have to reach of climbing severe, or leading severe grade climb for those who know the rock climbing grades, but in big mountain boots, with all of your kit and equipment on, and that sort of stuff. And you also have to lead difficult tactically at night with no torches. So I already done these pass out climbs, so I passed this phase and I was ready to move on to Wales to start hitting the mountains. So I was quite relaxed at this stage, and we did the jump. I landed, no problem at all, walked off, and the calcaneum in your heel is one of those places where you don't have a proper blood flow, so it takes a while for the body to react if you damage it. And about 5 minutes later, I literally dropped to the floor, pain like I'd never felt in my life, like someone had just literally got a screwdriver and hammered it into my heel. I just collapsed, went white, I was sick, I went into shock, and it was one of the worst pains I've ever experienced. And it was 6 months before I could walk properly again. So we do love a bit of tradition, but sometimes, and 2 other guys got injured on my course doing that. So future courses, and I actually went back to run the ML course later on in my career, and I took it out. No one had ever bottled it, and if you want to do it, then let's go and do it after the course, because I can't afford to have anyone just twist an ankle. It's a toss-up between tradition and ending someone's potential career by something that you don't have to do. And it was one of those calls where I think I might have been one of the first people to make the decision to not do it. And then you see, like, a lot of the old guard might say, "Oh, you can't take it out," and stuff like that. But I was just thinking about the individual lads on the course, what happened to me. And you know what? When the course is finished and when it's all over, let's all go back down as the last thing on the course and do it then. And that just because I on my course, 3 people got injured doing it, and almost every year someone got injured doing it, and so we removed it on the course, and then you can go back and do it after the course when there's less risk of injury. So that was a call I made when I ran the course, but it cost me a year for a bit of tradition.
My gosh, it sounds like you managed it well when you ran the course. That's a good compromise, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose sometimes you have to make fundamental changes, and that's what leadership's about, isn't it?
I got a 5-year-old, so compromise and fundamental changes.
Well, he thinks he's Batman, so you've got no chance.
Makes up my whole day. And in what to stick on the mountain leader kind of I was going to say ethos, or maybe I should just say section of our podcast, Baz. Can you give us some examples where your training really came into its own when in any theatre?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where it's the skill sets you learn on the mountain leader course take you to a place mentally and physically very few people get to go to. That's what it's designed about. Because when I ran the course, and I actually became the chief instructor of the whole branch later on in my career, responsible for running all of the courses, the more senior instructor courses and the junior courses. And what you're looking for in those individuals is something a bit unique, a bit different. And I wouldn't even start assessing them or really caring who they were, to be honest, until they were tired, till they were cold, till they were hungry, until they'd literally been on the bones of their arse for quite some time. That's when you see true character. That's when you see people really start to perform and tell you who they are. And you've got to take people to those situations to really understand and know what you're getting, because you're going to be putting those people into some of the most, hostile places on the planet where they're going to have to step up. And quite often it's the senior leaders that will look down at the young mountain leader in his section or in any given situation to get him out of trouble and get his men off that mountain or out of that situation. And you've got to step up. So the course is designed to make sure that those individuals, when they're under huge pressure, can deliver time and time again, regardless of what's happening. So let me take you to Afghanistan with the Brigade Patrol Troop, because the mountain leaders don't just teach and instruct. They are the small-scale commandos, if you like, of the modern day. They are the sort of the more elite guys within the Royal Marines. A lot of them are sniper trained. A lot of them are fire, fast air control trained. They do a lot of the jobs you'd expect from the SF community. And the synergies and the links in quite a lot of areas, do match up quite well. And, I found myself working harder in operational situations on occasions than I ever did on the ML course. And you could never have done that if the course hadn't prepared you for that. So we did some OPs in Afghanistan overlooking Bagram Air Base, not giving too much away, in the early 2000s. We were up at 14,000 feet altitude. We had to go self-sufficient for like 10 days. We're walking along small ridge lines, carrying jerry cans of water with 120, 130 pound packs on our back. I was a team sniper, so I've got my sniper rifle added, and all the scopes and all the ammunition that come with that job as well. And you literally have to have two people help you put your pack on. And then you're on a ridge line, literally getting dropped off by a helicopter with the tailgate down, floating in the sky, and you're jumping off the back onto this little ridge line, carrying jerry cans of water and all this kit, and then walking at 14,000, and it's still 20, 30 degrees heat, on occasions. And, it's right on the Karakoram mountain range. And, these insertions were just absolutely ninja, and you had to look about you, and everyone's going through the same situation. You don't know what the risks is at this stage. You don't know what's ahead or hiding behind that rock, and what's underneath your feet, and you just got to get on with it. And, when you're put in those situations and it's the real, boy, does the fact that course was so tough help and really sort of allow it to kick in. And you're looking around at equally trained people and you're just getting on with it. And it's so impressive to see and have the opportunity to have done.
My gosh. It's, you said the parallels with special forces. What you just described there is what we heard in Bravo 20, wasn't it? The same, and that was an SAS patrol for people who haven't read.
And many mountain leaders go on to the SBS and the SAS. It's a brilliant stepping stone into that world if that's what you wanted to do. I considered it for quite a few years in my career, but I actually loved being a Royal Marine mountain leader. So I decided I didn't want to pursue that avenue, but it definitely would have been right up my street if I wanted to. I just happened to keep getting good jobs, taking me to good places. I managed to do something completely different every 2 or 3 years in my career. So, but the SBS and the SAS are full of Royal Marine mountain leaders. They are ripe for that type of job and role.
We should point out, again, for people listening, everybody in the forces plays a role. So it doesn't matter who you are. If you're the guy standing on guard duty back in the UK when everyone else is on an operational tour, you are just as important in the whole grand scheme of things as the SBS sniper who's on the front line. And bringing this back to Baz's to the ML branch, who are considered almost sort of considered special forces within the Marines, or certainly an elite force. It's not about competition, Baz, is it? It's about you guys do a specific role.
Absolutely, I get it. That's the line in the career I chose to go down. When I started in my career as a Royal Marine, I was a driver. I was driving young recruits around, Woodbury Common and Dartmoor, because the Royal Marines were short of drivers at the time. In my troop and training, almost 50% of them were sent to be signallers, 50% of them were sent to be drivers, because the Royal Marines had a huge shortage. It wasn't for me, and I served 12 months, served my time, if you like, and moved on to different roles. But without the backroom staff, if you like, without the chefs and the clerks and the drivers and the mechanics and all of the other stuff that goes behind, then you don't even get to the ridgeline to go and insert into those jobs and roles, and you don't leave the barracks. You can't go anywhere. You've got to have the support chain behind, and people need to fulfill those roles in the military. There's banter, of course there is. The military's brilliant at banter. The Royal Marines, the Parachute Regiment. I'm not one that says we do this, we do that. My ethos and ethics around this are exactly the same as what you just said, Chris. We are all in this together. We are all the UK Armed Forces. We all have a job to do, and collectively we do it better than anyone else in the world, in my view. But it has to be a collective coming together. But the banter and the laugh and is when it's done in harmless and in jest and it's a bit of fun is again what the military's about. We have a great sense of humour, but there's always a line. But I'm hugely respectful of anybody, mate, that wears a cap badge and a beret for whatever regiment in whatever organisation. You're stepping up to do something incredible, and hats off to anybody, regardless of what they do. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Up the Boy Scouts is what I say.
Yes.
Baz, you're a man of adventure, and you've certainly been a great source of inspiration in my life. I think it was when we first met, and when Jay, as I said, was talking about you, and he mentioned this. What you're doing tomorrow. And it's fair to say you're no spring chicken, mate, unfortunately.
What do you mean? Look at me.
What are you now, 24 or 25?
I always... My wife always gives me a hard time because whenever I do interviews, I genuinely always forget how old I am. And I always get it wrong, and I always go younger, and she thinks I do it deliberately. I think I'm 46.
Yeah. I'm glad to meet someone else that... I know I'm 50 at the minute because you can't forget 50, right? All the 46 and 47s.
Yeah, I get confused, mate. It's yeah. So I think I've got a bit of time left.
Yeah. So this crazy thing Jay was telling me is that this man here got up one day and ran a ridiculous amount of mileage. Was it from Poole, which is where our special forces train, to Lympstone, where our recruits train?
Yeah.
And in fact,
I'm back again.
Yeah. And how much is that mileage?
176 miles along the southwest coast path, pretty much non-stop. So running for 48 hours. Yeah.
How much was it just one way?
88 miles.
So this man ran 88 miles. And Jay was at the other end, was supporting him. He said, Baz got to the other end. They put you in a shower and they were trying to feed you. And Jay said you'd never seen a more broken, exhausted, injured, damaged person who could barely walk. Once they got him dressed again, Baz went, I'm running back again. And he turned around and he ran 86 miles back in this state. So what have you got to say about that, mate?
Yeah, that was a bit nuts, mate. I mean, that was when I do a lot to support the Royal Marines charity on my T-shirt, and certain skill sets offer you opportunity to do these things. So as a mountain leader, people love doing charity abseils off buildings, rope slides off bridges, and all that sort of stuff. And within, one of my particular roles, helping and supporting what we call the Corps Colonel's Office these days, who do all of the outreach and do all of the marketing stuff, recruiting and bits and pieces. They quite often get asked to do charity events, charity fundraisers and stuff like that. And I ended up being the guy responsible for running a lot of it. And I sort of saw something that I really liked in this charity stuff and fundraising stuff. And I've seen the absolute, destruction conflict can do on people and their families and stuff like that. So I've been a massive advocate of the Royal Marines charity supporting and trying to raise funds. So I started not only supporting events with my skill set as a mountain leader to help raise funds, I thought, you know what, I'd like to do something myself. And that was sort of mid to late 90s. I decided I was going to start trying to raise a few money myself and seeing what I could do, if you like. The first event I actually did was a 24-hour non-stop ski in Norway. And I picked a day in Norway where I was going to go around this 25-kilometer loop skiing, and I wasn't going to stop for 24 hours. And that was the first thing I did. And it turned out, mate, it happened to drop to minus 35 degrees when I started this thing, and it didn't get any warmer. So I had to do it literally at minus 35. I had massive icicles hanging off my face. I was in bits, mate. But that sort of started it. And then we have a race called the Lympstone to Poole race in memory of an SBS guy who died quite a few years ago who loves his running. And they decided that Lympstone to Poole race was going to be a competition between ranks from Lympstone and ranks from Poole that would fight it out for the Lympstone to Poole race trophy. All other units could join in as well for one winner trophy, but there was always a private competition within this race for the Lympstone and the Poole guys. And I'd entered this and done this race a couple of times. We put a team of MLs in. We came second overall the first time I did it, which was great. But it's an 88-mile race that starts at Lympstone, finishes at Poole. You do it over 2 days, and you're in teams of 4. So you run 44 miles on the first day. One pair run 22 miles. The next pair run 22 miles. Then you repeat, and you end up at Poole the next day. So you've done 2 22-mile legs. So I decided, as a bit of a fundraiser, I was going to run the whole thing in one go. So alongside the race, I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to do it all in a oneer. And then someone said to me, don't be so stupid. Why don't you just run back as well? Literally a throwaway comment. Read right to a ball with me. I went, okay, then I will. So the event was called 176 Non-Stop was born, basically. And then I started doing a load of fundraising, telling people I was going to go and do this event. And before I knew it, I was at the start line with Jason again. And I started the day before the actual race at Lympstone. And I've just started running towards Lympstone, but on the coast path, and those who've been on the coast path, it's just constant up and down. So it's not like just running a flat 88 miles. And yes, I was in bits when I got to Lympstone. And literally, as I was approaching Lympstone, the race had started. So all of the guys knew I was doing this, and all of the teams then started running through me as I was still going in the opposite direction. And then when I got to Lympstone, I had all the physical training instructors massaging my legs, trying to bring me back to life, feeding me, and all that sort of stuff. The commandant even had the Royal Marines band out, doing the drums and all that sort of stuff, marching me down, the sort of main drag into Commando training centre, which was nice, although I probably wasn't even really properly aware what was going on. Turned around, and then I'm now playing catch up with the race. So I'm now chasing them, and they stop at the campsite near Bridport, near West Bay, where they stay overnight. So as I'm continuously running, I then pass them through the night while they're sleeping in the campsite, and then I crack on beyond them, and I'm still going. They get up in the morning, restart their race, and then we all finished about the same time at Lympstone. And the whole race, everybody who was there was stood in a big crowd, and they clapped me into Poole, and it was fantastic. And a couple of my great friends I had, Baz Barrett supporting me, who was one of the first really seriously injured guys in Afghanistan. I pushed him over the finish line in his wheelchair, which was an amazing moment. And my wife was there, and it was just a great thing to do. And there were stages throughout it where I couldn't keep my eyes open, I physically couldn't walk, and I learned more about mental resilience and mindset on that run than I've learned doing anything else in my life. and that taught me more about me and who I am and what my capabilities are than anything. Not a simple run, but asking your body to just keep going, time and time and time again, and crossing the finish line. And then no one saw me for a week because I was dead. But it's just never doubting yourself. Don't give up. Just keep going. If you can still put one foot in front of the other, then do it until you physically can't do that anymore. And I just had that mindset, and it's something I've found that I'm just quite good at for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out because I remember when we chatted before I did my John O'Groats to Land's End, and this is what would put most people off, is obviously I'd had 4 spinal procedures. Yeah. I hadn't walked further than the car in 2 years.
Yeah.
So I'd done no training. I then had a month window of training before I went to John O'Groats. But that was taken up with this weird, virus thing that I came down with, which was just weird because I don't really get ill, so I still don't know what it was. So, but they always say don't train when you're ill. So, and I mean, I couldn't train. I've had a clicking ankle for the last 10 years. I had this brain damage in my head where I got this constant tinnitus. And I wake up guaranteed every morning. Well, at least back then I'd wake up 4 o'clock. Couldn't sleep past 4 o'clock, like I'd got a hangover or something, right? Yeah. And so everything was against me, Baz, wasn't it? From your rational point of view, it was don't do this. It's running 1,000-mile non-stop, carrying all your own equipment, and trying to crack an ultramarathon a day. It's going to end in tears.
Yeah, it is. And I think I remember saying to you, look, you're determined to do this. I know you're going to do this. I'm not going to join the group of people that are going to tell you not to do this. Only you, and I know you, and you can tell, quite good at picking up characters quite early. You were going to go and do this. So what can I say to stop you? Well, what's the point? What can I say to encourage you and help you? And what can I do to support becomes the line of questioning, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Right, great. Okay, you're doing it. Let's do it. And what can I do to help? And how can I support? And let's make it happen then. If you don't do it, you don't do it, but you'll go as far as you can. You'll give it your best shot. You might get to Land's End, you might not, but Chris is off. So let's get behind him, really, isn't it?
And the message there really wasn't to sort of blow my own trumpet. It was just for people listening. Imagine how many people wouldn't have done that with what seemed against them, and they'd have missed out on. I'm always saying, you get one life, you've got to live it. And if you've got a dream or a goal, and you think no, or you let other people talk you out of it, it's just take Baz's example and just say no. I'm going to turn around and run back again.
Yeah, I think my wife at the time, that morning, was the only person that knew I would get back. I was confident I would get back because she knows what a stubborn twat I am. But, everyone else was just like that. Okay, well, we'll just run with him until he stops then. I mean, in my head, I was saying, right, I'll just do 100 miler. People have got to be impressed with that. I'll get to 3 figures and I'll stop there. And I got to 100 miles and I was still moving and relatively okay. And I thought, right, well, let's just hit the next village. I'll stop at the next village. And then the next village. And before you know, you've hit pool, and you're just like, how did I do that?
Yes, and that's another important thing in life, is to have a partner that freaking supports you instead of tearing you down. Because I'm coming up to the day when I literally, my flight was the next day, Baz, and I'm flying to John O'Groats. And I did start, and then you've obviously got to start your Facebook campaign and your social media. So the press are contacting you, and you're going to be out there on display, whether you like it or not. And I looked at Jen and went, Jen, what am I doing? And I know I've told you this, Baz, and she just looked at me and went, you'll do it. She just, like you said, she just knows me too well. She went, you do it, you'll do it. You always do.
Well, it does help, mate, when you got that back home.
Let's talk Shackleton, because that was an epic, almost, I don't know if it's went a bit unsung, Baz, did it? Or is it just that you have to be in the right circles?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it did or it didn't, mate. I mean, I was still a serving Royal Marine when I did that, and it was sort of Tim Jarvis's expedition, but it aired really well on Discovery. As a free 1 hour documentary, it went down really well. They still repeat play it now, so it's, I suppose, it was a tough expedition. In the fact that these things are notoriously difficult to fund and get funding for, and to have a massive marketing campaign before was something Tim found really difficult. But it started for me when I was drafted to HMS Endurance, which is the UK's Antarctic patrol ship, if you like, for the Royal Navy and the Foreign Commonwealth Office. It's called HMS Protector today. I was on there in 2005 as the Royal Marine Mountain Leader Specialist. So this ship goes to the coldest place on Earth, and it's full of a crew that haven't really got a clue what they're doing in the coldest places on Earth. Not all of them, but quite a few of them are complete novices. So you have to have a team of specialists on board working for the captain to ensure that his crew have the right clothing, right equipment, and most importantly, the right training to look after themselves when they get off the ship in Antarctic environments. And so I went down there as the lead mountain leader, cold weather instructor for HMS Endurance for a year on board that ship. And it was incredible. And this is where my two passions in life now really started, Chris. I got passion big time for big adventure, big expeditions, real exposed parts of the planet, and polar history. I love polar history. And when you're down in Antarctica, stood on a glacier on your own, where probably only a handful of people have ever stood, ever, and you start looking around and you start taking in and then reading about the heroic age of polar exploration, your Shackletons and your Scotts and your Amundsens. Well, for me, it was just the most surreal experience on Earth. I get inspired by picking up one of their books and reading it in a normal environment. Try reading it on a glacier in Antarctica where their expeditions were actually happening 100 years before you. And it just does something, or did something to me. And I thought, I want a bit of this. And I started doing more research about the polar age and polar history. I do a lot of talks and lectures about that era now as well. And in my research and study, I just stumbled across this expedition that Tim Jarvis was putting together on behalf of Ernest Shackleton's granddaughter, Alexandra Zaz, who wanted someone to repeat what her grandfather did in 1914, 1916. 100 years later. And I sent Tim an email and said, look, mate, this is who I am. I'm Baz, I'm a Royal Marine. I know the environment quite well. This is my experience. Any chance? And he wrote me back straight away and said, absolutely, you're exactly the sort of person thing I'm looking for. And I took on the whole mountaineering role, if you like, within the 6-man team.
Should we just talk about why Sir Ernest Shackleton was such a legend, Baz?
So I'll very quickly spin the story. So he was someone who just loved expeditions down to polar regions. His first major polar expedition was with Scott's Discovery Expedition, 1903, where they attempted to walk on foot to the South Pole. Not very successful. He was actually invalided home and sent home from that one. In 1907 to 1909, he created his own expedition, which was his first expedition that he ran down to Antarctica, called the Nimrod Expedition, where he was again attempting to be the first person to walk on foot from the edge of Antarctica to the South Pole. Still never been done at this stage. He got to within 97 miles of the South Pole, 88 degrees latitude, turned around because he knew he didn't have enough time, stores and supplies to get back safely. The whole team would have made the South Pole, but they would have perished on their return. Guarantees. So he made the right leadership decision to turn them around. And then in his planning to try and go back again, he was pipped to the post by Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian, in December 1911. And then our own Robert Falcon Scott reached the South Pole in January 1912. And he did lose his whole team on the return journey. So what was left, that was done. he decided the endurance expedition was going to be born, and he was going to attempt to take an expedition across the entire Antarctic continent. So not stopping at the pole, walking all the way across. So that's what endurance was all about. He took a ship of 28 men down to South Georgia, left South Georgia December 1914, heading for the coast, and never arrived. His ship got trapped in the pack ice, was eventually crushed and sank to the bottom of the sea. So he stood on a floating sea ice shelf with 28 men in the middle of the First World War, where no one knows where they are, no one's got a clue what's happened to them, and he's got no way of raising the alarm or getting rescue. So what he managed to save off endurance, 3 little 23-foot lifeboats. And he had to sit on this ice shelf for over a year. Horrendous conditions. He got trapped in the ice January 1915, and he was released by the ice in these 3 little rowing boats in April 1916. So they lived through an entire Antarctic winter, 24-hour darkness, temperatures down to -60, the windiest place on the planet, in canvas shelter. Can you imagine it? Horrific for over a year. And in April, the ice beneath their feet started breaking up, so they could take to sea in these little rowing boats. And they had a week of getting smashed, battered, frostbitten, hypothermic, not eaten properly, knowing if they stopped rowing they would disappear out to sea, just aiming for land, a spit of land anywhere. And eventually they hit this tiny little place called Elephant Island. First time they hit it in late April 1916. First time those men had stepped foot on proper land since December 1914. Crazy, isn't it? And then they're just stuck there. No one has ever been to Elephant Island before. No ships go past that place looking for people that might be stranded there. There's just a bunch of penguins that, who are now getting clubbed to death because that's what they needed to keep themselves alive. And Shackleton decided, look, we've got to try and raise the alarm. We've got to go for rescue. So they made one of the boats called the James Caird. All these little boats had names after the major benefactors of the expedition. James Caird, I think, contributed something like £23,000 to the expedition, which is huge bucks these days. And they made it as seaworthy as they possibly could by putting 1,000 kilos of ballast in the bottom, trying to put some sort of cover over it to protect them. They made makeshift sails from canvas materials that they had. And he put a team of 5 men plus himself together and decided to head out to sea and raise the alarm and try and get back to an island that was manned where they could raise the alarm. The closest manned place was actually probably up somewhere off the coast of South Africa, the Falkland Islands, maybe something like that, Paula Island. But because they couldn't tack into wind and actually sail it like a modern day sailboat, they could only go with wind and tide. So they were really restricted as to how they could control the boat at sea. The roughest ocean on the planet, by the way, and 50, 60-foot rolling seas, freezing temperatures. He decided the only chance they had was to try and head back to where it all started, South Georgia, which is 800 miles away. Now, this journey was described by Sir Edmund Hillary as the most remarkable survival story ever told. 6 men in this boat, navigating by the stars, using only a sextant for navigation, aiming for this tiny little pinprick in the ocean, 800 miles away. It is an impossible task, but they did. Frank Worsley, the navigator, just did such an incredible task. No reason why they should have landed in South Georgia. Absolutely no reason whatsoever. But they did, mate. They got there. 22 men still back on Elephant Island. It's now middle of May 1916. They're on the wrong side of South Georgia. He couldn't afford to sail past it because he couldn't have tacked back in. And the reason he had to get to the far side, because that's where all the whaling stations were. That's where the people were. There was no one on this side. So he had to bump straight into it, then cross over the mountain range of South Georgia to raise the alarm. No one had ever crossed South Georgia's internal mountain range. He didn't know what to expect. He had no mountaineering gear whatsoever, a bit of mountaineering knowledge. Old manila ropes. They put hobnails through their boots that they took off the soles, that they took off the James Caird boat just to get grip on the ice. It's an incredible story. 3 of them were so incapacitated that he had to leave them behind at King Haakon Bay because they just physically couldn't make the walk. 26-mile journey, due east as the crow flies. He had a few epics en route. Again, he should never have ever made it into Stromness where he got to, but he did. knocked on the whaling station manager's house, who was a good friend of his. He didn't recognise Shackleton until he opened his voice, and then he broke down in tears because he thought these guys were all lost. But he made it into Stromness, and he'd raised the alarm. This is May, I think 24th of May, 1916. Immediately, Shackleton's now focus is on his men and getting a ship to get back to Elephant Island. First, the 3 men he left on the other side of South Georgia, picked them up the following morning. Then he's got 22 men to look after. Mate, it took 4 attempts, 4 ships, 4 attempts to get back to Elephant Island, because the sea around Elephant Island just freezes and thaws, and quite often you'll just hit these massive ice flows. And they didn't have big icebreakers like they do today. And they just kept getting pushed back, and they couldn't get back into Elephant Island. It wasn't until August, mate, 30th of August, that he got a ship called the Yelko, which he begged the Chileans to lend him, to get back into Elephant Island, not knowing if they would still be alive. Bear in mind, he left them in April. It's now the 30th of August. Not knowing if they'd still be alive, not knowing if Frank Wild, his trusted number 2, had actually used one of the other boats now, because there was a plan. If I don't come back, you're going to have to attempt something yourself. That, he might have set off and made his own attempt, thinking the boss is never going to come back. But they were there. All 22 men were still alive. That's why it's known as a survival story. No one died. He brought everybody home, mate. And that's the incredible story of the endurance expedition, mate. It's a bit nuts, isn't it?
It's nuts, but it gets nuts again because you and Tim and your team recreated this journey from the ice.
From Elephant Island to, and it was 4 years in the planning, this expedition, really tough one to put together. And these things are notoriously expensive, they're dangerous, and it was the Discovery wanting to document it in the end that got the budget together to make it actually happen. But it was about being as authentic as possible. It was about not trying to be them and say, hey, we can do what Shackleton did. It was never about that. But it was about being able to tell the story from a point of view no one else has ever been able to tell the story from. From being 6 men in a tiny little boat that was built to exactly the same spec. And we can do that because the original's at Dulwich College. And we can go and take all the measurements and the building techniques. And we use the Royal Boat Builders at Lowestoft College to help build and construct the boat in the same way as it was built back then. And we made pretty much an exact replica. No modern advantages whatsoever. And we dragged this thing to Elephant Island. Our clothing, everything was the same. When you looked at the 6 of us, apart from the fact that we weren't black with soot and dirt and all of that from living in those conditions for over a year, we were on Elephant Island. We were in effect 6 people from the Shackleton team. No modern advantage, no modern technology whatsoever. We set off from Elephant Island in 2013 to attempt this 800-mile journey in exactly the same style these guys did, mate. Same waters, same waves, same storm conditions, no GPS. All navigation was done by sextant and sort of timepiece by Paul Larsson and Nick Bob. Incredible job they did. I didn't have a clue what they were doing. I just did what I could do on the boat, look after people, feed them, make sure they got what they need. My expertise was to come later. And we'd all take turns sailing this bloody thing in shifts with these 2 manila ropes steering the rudder like they did, trying to keep it on the right course and getting battered, waves coming over. Oh, it's horrendous, mate.
And just to clarify, Baz, you weren't doing this wearing all Gucci modern equipment. You had recreated what these fellas had.
We were wearing what they were wearing, you know, and that was it. Oh, woolly jumpers. You know, they're horrible when they're wet, but they'll still keep you warm. The kit kept us alive. But by the time we hit South Georgia, and we did completely unsupported with no help whatsoever, we made it into South Georgia like he did. And people say, yeah, but it was filmed by Discovery and stuff like that. And you have to understand the circumstances and the situation that they were in. That wasn't a support boat. That was a boat that was shadowing the expedition from miles away, reporting to the outside world how we were getting on. And we had hidden cameras on board the boat that were just running on batteries buried in the ballast that could run for 20 days and just filming everything. So we weren't actually talking to the Discovery crew or seeing the boat, and they were always off at a distance. But what you have to understand, in 50, 60-foot rolling seas, if we were to get into trouble, that boat was also in trouble. It needed to look after itself. If it was trying to pull up alongside you in those types of seas, it would just smash you and crush you They couldn't come anywhere near you. So in those rough seas, you're on your own. There's no support boat out there that's going to come and get you. And if someone went overboard, like Shackleton's boat, we couldn't turn around and tack into the wind. We just got these makeshift sails blowing us in one direction. We'd have been lost. You'd have been gone. No one was coming to get you. So it was genuinely unsupported from that point of view. And if it's a calm, still mill pond day, then you're not in trouble. You don't need support anyway, because nothing's going to go wrong when it's like that. So we managed to drag our backsides into King Haakon Bay, and then we had to cross the mountain range like he did. That's where I stepped up, and it became my job to lead the guys with my skill sets across that range. Again, we put screws through the soles of our boots like he did to get grip on ice, walking up to my knees and thighs in soft powder snow. It'll take like 5-6 hours to do a couple of kilometers because you're that tired and you're that fatigued. And like Shackleton, we had 3 guys completely incapacitated by the boat journey that couldn't do the crossing. They got trench foot, quite bad trench foot, which is a really severe injury, and their feet just ballooned in size and they couldn't walk. So they had to go back to the support boat and sort of start their recovery process, while me and Tim cracked on with our old manila rope across South Georgia, falling through crevasses and all sorts of epics, mate.
If I can just interject, Bas, because it's a one amazing, it was an amazing documentary. But there's one part in it when you've landed on South Georgia,
yeah,
where the doctor from the television company,
yeah,
and they're obviously concerned about their insurance and all this and their image in it, and he forbid you to carry on, and he said,
yeah.
This
he
is
was actually referring to sort of Ed Wardle. Ed Wardle was the embedded cameraman, if you like. Great guy, Ed. You know, I think he's been up Everest like 5 times now. It was Ed that documented and filmed Dan Middleton going up Everest. That documentary he did last year. And Ed's a great guy. So he was responsible for rigging the boat and the cameras and all of that. So although he was part of the 6-man team, he was the only person actually that the production company were responsible for on that expedition, and the doctor and everyone else. The other 5 of us were completely independently looked after. We were doing it on our own chits, if you like, volunteers. We had nothing to do with that. Only Ed was under a different contract. So they were basically telling him, you know, with this trench foot and this injury you've got, and if you go, then your insurance isn't going to be valid if you have any problems. And they were like scaremongering a little bit, trying to get a bit of reaction, trying to get a bit of drama for TV. I don't know. But at the time, you know, they weren't looking at us. They were talking to us like normal people that hadn't been through anything, like we just started, not people who hadn't slept for 17 days, who were completely fatigued. I got a little bit upset, if you like, a little bit pissed off. It's probably an understatement at this attitude and this behaviour and this scaremongering type thing going on, you know. And I sort of, you know, might have threatened him a little bit at the time, but in the mind state that we were in, you know, that would have been a perfectly normal, acceptable reaction, you know. And they should never have been trying to provoke in the way that they did. There's other ways to handle situations like that. But anyway, it sort of confirmed to Ed, you know, I've got a family to think about, you know, and I can't go. So Ed did end up pulling out the crossing.
What was the feeling like, Baz, when you and Tim walked into what would have been the whaling station? And
on this, yeah, it was amazing, mate. I think nobody thought we were going to do it. Genuinely, as it was quite a funny bit in Tim's book where we actually started with a film crew, so we were going to get shadowed by a film crew across South Georgia from a distance, again, not supporting, just filming from a distance. But with my level of expertise, even though the fatigue state I was in, I was still responsible for the safety of everybody crossing South Georgia. I had put the safety plan together. It was me everyone had to answer to. And literally within the first few miles, it started becoming quite clear that one of the guys was struggling. You know, we're the guys who should have been struggling, but one of the camera crew was struggling. And it became quite clear to me that I'm not going to commit to South Georgia proper and start heading towards those proper mountains, you know, if you're already showing signs of problems and issues. So I had to evacuate the camera crew pretty much within the first few hours. And while doing that, we then got caught out on one of the still, for me and everything I've done, one of the biggest mother storms I've ever been caught out in. We got those guys off safely, which basically left me and Tim pinned to the Shackleton Glacier, literally, for 2.5 days, just getting absolutely battered. Physically couldn't move. The weather was too bad. The winds were too strong. 150, 160 kilometre winds, I kid you not, were buffeting us. And we just had to pin it down. And Tim leaned over to me and says, Baz, how long are we going to sit here before we have to call this a day? And I just went, I don't know, mate, a couple of weeks. He's expecting me to say a couple of hours and being ready to go down. And he just looked at me and went, what? And we had a massive laugh. And we just went, mate, there's only two things that are going to happen. I'm going to walk across this mountain on my own, genuinely, and I'm going to probably fall through a glacier, or you're coming with me. And he went, mate, I'm with you. I said, right, as soon as we get a window, we're off. But everybody literally was waiting for us to come down. They were just waiting for the call to say, right, yeah, it's over, we're coming down. But what they actually got was a radio call from me to say, we're off. And they were like, what do you mean? What are you off? You've got to think about this. And just said, right, we're leaving in an hour. And we packed up, roped up, and off we went.
Amazing. And
we pulled it off.
And the patron of the expedition was?
Yeah, his granddaughter, Alexandra. It's a great friend of mine, Zaz. So I love her. She patrons all my expeditions now, and she's a fantastic lady, real passionate, about her grandfather and his life, and she's the custodian of that now, and she's incredible. So when we finished, she just happened to be on a cruise ship in the area, because she'll do a lot of guest speaking and talking on cruise ships about her family and her grandfather. So the piece de resistance for me, if you like, and one of the most memorable moments, was to stand around his grave, because he's buried in Grytviken in South Georgia, where he died in 1922. And he's been buried there ever since. We met his granddaughter, the whole team, all 6 of us, around his grave, where we had a toast of his favourite whiskey. And yeah, what a fitting way to end that experience and that expedition. That just gave me the bug then. I'm now big expedition Baz. I love it, and I want to do some more. So yeah.
Brilliant. And massive congratulations to you and your team, Baz. And I should point out that I'm very proud to have met Alexandra, and that was at one of your dues. So should we come on and talk about that?
Yeah. In fact, mate, you can probably, if you zoom in there behind me, you see those pictures on the wall. A lot of those are the old Shackleton. There's me and Tim there, dressed in our authentic gear.
I'll try and put some of this.
Claire gives me a hard time because I've got a shrine room like all good people should have. That's just pictures of me all over the wall.
I've got a couple in here.
No pictures of the family or anything like that. Just pictures of me. But yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I decided, mate. I'm in a crossroads now in life. I've gone back from the expedition. That was in 2013. This is when I'd been not long after promoted to Sergeant Major. I was the Sergeant Major of the Brigade Reconnaissance Force. And then when you're a Sergeant Major, I decided I wanted to have a stab at being a Regimental Sergeant Major. I applied. I passed. I got selected with a great friend of mine, Dave Mason, who's the current Senior Corps RSM. I'm about to hand over to a guy called Rick Angove. He's just finishing his tenure. But when I'd been in RSM for a few years now, and I had a great career. I'd served 26 years, but I also now had this passion for expeditions. Now, when you do a job like RSM, when I did the Shackleton Epic expedition, I was like out of the office for 2 months. There was no operational tours happening at the time. We're in a relatively benign, safe time in history. I could afford to step away from the office, and the caliber of people around me would just pick up my role and just crack on, But as an RSM, you can't disappear on expeditions. You're one of the key figures in every commando unit, working with the commanding officer. You're a tag team that basically run, 600-700 men. And you can't step off on expeditions and go and do these things while you're in a job like that. It's one or the other. So I now hit a line in my life. Do I carry on and try to become the core RSM, the most senior RSM? Do I want that on my CV? Or have I really got this expedition bug, and do I want to leave and crack on and go and do something else? I did all the pros and cons as you do, wrote down all of the, the things that I wanted to achieve, what staying in the Royal Marines would give me. And I just had a massive list of things that were pointing towards leave, and a very small list of things to keep me in, which was a steady job, steady pay, medical care, all the guarantees that come with that type of role. I chatted to my bosses. I chatted to the brigadier, the brigade commander at the time, the core RSM at the time. Spoke to my family, and eventually the decision was just made by reading through the notes I'd been making and the conversations I'd been having. And I decided to leave, mate. After 26 years, I felt I'd done enough. I felt I'd done my bit. I'd served on operations all over the globe, and I've been responsible for training and mentoring thousands of people. It's a huge amount of experience for the Royal Marines to leave, but it was time for me to leave. And that's when Challenge Antarctica was born. That's what I was going to go and do.
Tell us more.
So back to my Shackleton days and my love for polar history. I, from 2005 actually, decided one day I wanted to come back down and also do something that had never been done in Antarctica. So I want to attempt to do something no one's ever done. Like Shackleton was attempting to do something no one had ever done then. People have walked across the whole continent since and now. I think the first time was 1957, the first expedition to actually cross the entire continent. But nobody yet has done it solo, unsupported and unassisted. Now, when I say unassisted, there's a word we sort of had loads of politics across all sorts of, polar historian groups and modern day explorers about what's assistance, what isn't, what's unsupported. Mate, I genuinely couldn't give a toss about all of those politics and who's done what and what people think. I just personally want to walk across Antarctica from one side to the other, from sea to sea, on my skis, without using modern day kites and things like that. And I don't even know if it's possible. I don't even know if it can be done. But I want to give it a go. For my reasons, my own personal reasons, for nothing else. And it will be called unsupported, solo and unassisted because I'm not using a kite. And I think it's one of the most incredible, unfinished, undone journeys, if you like, or that modern man can possibly do. People have come reasonably close. My very good friend Lou Rudd, who's just released his book. You spoke to Lou a while ago, mate. He's just released his book Endurance Today. He just did an amazing exhibition last year, or 2 seasons ago. He was down there the same time as me, where he's basically the first guy to walk across the entire landmass, the hidden land underneath the ice that's down there. Almost 1,000 miles unsupported, unassisted. Incredible journey. But for me, the most inspirational journey ever done solo as an individual in Antarctica was one done by Borg Ausland in 1997. And he was the first guy to truly go from one side of Antarctica to the other, and it was an amazing expedition. I think he did it in 67, 68 days. And on his second half, he used a kite, a makeshift kite, to pull himself along, and allowed him to gain a lot more distance and a lot more ground to get all the way into McMurdo Sound, truly completing the journey Shackleton, we think, was intending to do. Hands above, hats off. That's the biggest, most impressive expedition I've ever seen a soloist, an individual, do or take on. Truly incredible, mate. And because it was 1997, the technology wasn't what it is today. The food was heavier, the fuel for your cookers, you had to carry so much more. The kite he had would give him an advantage back then, but people can do 500-600 kilometers in a day on a kite now. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So that truly is a different ball game, a completely different ball game. So I just want to go from one side to the pole to the other side without using a kite, simply without using assistance, just with what I've got on my feet, my skis, my pulk, my food, everything, and away I go. And I thought, trying to attempt this one go, I'm ready now, big balls, bars, I'm mentally strong, I can go and do this. I thought this was probably one step too far for me now. I've got to go and do something else. So that's why I broke Challenge Antarctica down into 2 phases. Phase 1 was to go from the coast to the South Pole and put myself through an epic, very long, very tough, very hard expedition to the South Pole, just to see how I get on. Learn a bit more about Antarctica, learn a bit more about me, spend over a month on my own, out in this really hostile place, pulling heavy weights behind me, routine day after day after day. If I could make it to the South Pole on that expedition, then I would have all the answers and have all the questions I would need to ask to decide whether or not phase 2 to do a full crossing would be on or not. So that I felt was the sensible approach. So I went down and left the Corps, started training my ass off, trips out to Norway, dragging tyres around Dartmoor, doing gym work, getting back to being as fit as I was when I was that young mountain leader, at the start of the course. And felt I got myself into, great condition. And before I knew it, I was in a little place called Union Glacier in Antarctica. And then I was on this tiny little plane getting dropped off at the edge of this massive, massive ice shelf. And I was on my own, November 2016, November 2017. And I was like, how did that happen? How am I stood here? Not too far from a place where Shackleton would have tried to land all them years ago, seeing the things he would have seen, experiencing the noises and the sounds that he would have been hearing and seeing back then, because it hasn't changed. It's just ice. A couple of little mountains sticking up through the ice, the Trans-Antarctic Mountain Range in the distance. And off I went, mate. Groundhog Day. Just what? Eat, sleep, rest, eat, sleep, rest, eat, sleep, rest, ski, ski, ski. It was just a really, really tough season. More snow had fallen in that season than on record. Mm-hmm. So expeditions were finding it really, really tough. And people were stopping. Expeditions were giving up. Every day another expedition was pulling out because they just weren't making the distance they were expecting to make. And I was in the same situation for quite a long period of that. I think I went for 7 hours on one particular day and covered about 2 nautical miles, and it was just ridiculous. And when snow falls in that environment, because it's so dry, fresh snow, the consistency of it on a sled is like trying to drag your sled across sand. It's really weird to explain, but that's what it feels like. And you just can't move this thing. There's no glide when it's like that. And you're just working so hard. And sometimes you've got to think, is the time and effort I'm putting in worth the distance I'm covering? And sometimes the answer simply is no. You just put your tent up and wait for wait for it to improve. And I started to get concerned about potentially running out of food, because I only took 40 days of rations. Most people will take 50 to 55 for this journey. I took 40 because I knew I had to do it in around 35 to 40 days. If I was even going to think about doing the entire continent, I need to be pulling off one of the quickest times in history to get to the South Pole. I've got to be in that league.
Yeah.
And I did set a 35-day target. And then quite quickly, sort of halfway through, I realized that ain't going to happen. I can't cover the distance. I just can't cover the ground. Other expeditions were just pulling out. And I felt genuinely one of the lowest moments I've ever had in my entire life was just after the halfway point. I now had to cover 18, 19 nautical miles a day just to hit the South Pole before I run out of food. I hadn't covered 18 miles once up to this point. I've been going 20 days, 21 days. I think 15 miles was like the furthest I'd got. And I'm like, this is just impossible. And there's an airfield called Field Airfield halfway to the pole where the planes stop and refuel. They can't go from Union Glacier all the way to the pole and all the way back on one tank of fuel. So they have this like midway runway. And planes come in and out of there all the time. And I was sat there, and the temptation to just sit and wait for the plane to come in. There would have been one in the next day or two. And then just to get on the plane and say, I gave it my best shot. I tried. It was there. That's what I was thinking. I was sitting there thinking that. I was so tired. I was so fatigued. And eventually I just went, what are you doing? What are you even thinking? And I just literally picked my skis up, put them on, and just got the hell out of there. Just crawled away from it and got 10 miles away and thought, just stop thinking like that, because that's what's going to get you on that plane. And then I got myself so far away that it wouldn't be worth going back. It was such an incredibly powerful moment in my head.
Was there, I'm thinking, from an expeditionary point of view, was there a point where, as the snow conditions hopefully got better, as your bulk got lighter, because obviously you're using fuel and you're eating up your rations,
yep.
And as you got fitter, because obviously on these long treks, you kind of get match fit as you go along, don't you?
Yeah.
And you lose a bit of your own, you get a bit leaner in yourself.
Yeah.
Was there like a fulcrum point where it went from being extremely hard, almost impossible, to right, bang, we're going to, we're smashing this?
Almost from that point, something changed, something switched in my head. And then all of a sudden the conditions started to change as well, because you do start climbing up. The thickness of the ice on average is over 2,000 meters, about 10,000 feet. The South Pole is 2,800 meters above sea level. 10,000 feet of ice beneath your feet. And you gradually start making that climb. Bear in mind, I started at sea level. You start climbing up and up, so altitude starts having an effect. And because of where it's located on the planet, and it's so dry down there as well, 2,500 meters actually on the body feels more like 4,500 meters. It has an added effect, the altitude. So it really does. When people who get dropped off to do just the last degree get dropped off around 2,500 meters to do the last 100 kilometers, they can hardly breathe when they first get dropped off. They really struggle. They do have the effects of like being at 4,500, 5,000 meters, and they end up covering like 2 or 3 miles when they do the last degree. It takes them about 10 days to do the last degree. I ended up doing I did the last degree in 2 days, for example. But yeah, I basically, what I did was thinking, right, there's no way I'm going to make it to 40 days. So I thought, what can I do? So I took all of my food out. I laid all of my food out on the ice in front of me, and I took a little bit from every little bag, and I created 3 more days of food just by taking a little bit out of the sort of the 20 days I had left. And so I created 43 days. So I thought, right, okay, I'm going to have a little bit less food every day, but I've now got 43 days to get in. So that's brought my mileage down to like 16 miles or whatever to do it in. And that very day, mate, I went out and smashed the furthest distance I've ever smashed on the whole thing so far. I did 16 miles. Such a morale booster, mate. I was like, wow, that was incredible. And then I thought, a bit like you on your run, mate, where you decided, you needed to spend more time running. You need to get up earlier, and I can still keep moving at the same steady pace, but if I just keep moving a bit longer, then I'm going to cover more distance in a daily. I had to do that. So what for me were 10 to 12 hour shifts every day became 12 to 15 hour shifts. I just found this level of motivation. And you are right, your sled is starting to get lighter. You're starting to chomp your way through the food. You're using up your fuel from the cooker, which is a big weight thing. But you're then gaining altitude, and you're also getting more fatigued every day. So it does, I suppose, get a little easier, but it's always been counterbalanced by your body's now starting to degrade massively as well in this environment. And you're burning 10,000 calories and only putting 6,500 back in your body. And that's the nature of these journeys. And the next day I did 17, the next day I did 18, the next day I did 18, then I was doing 19, and things just unleashed themselves from there. And I started thinking, actually, I think I might actually now get back into a 40-day window. And I thought, if I keep doing this 18, 19 miles a day now, I'm actually going to hit the 40-day original, or not the 35-day original target, but I'm going to actually get in within my original ration state of 40 days. Because you'd always take a 5-day fudge factor. And before you know it, mate, I looked up, and from literally 12 miles away on a clear day, I looked up and saw the South Pole, mate, and it was just there. It's like the rainbow. It never gets any closer. You just see it for hours and hours, and it just seems to just sit there, and you're just yomping away. But in the last in the last 24 hours, I covered 36 nautical miles, pretty much non-stop. You know, just that mental, you're almost there. It doesn't matter now how tired or how fatigued I get. I don't have to think about tomorrow's yomp because I'm going to be at the South Pole. And actually, I did. There's a little sign you approach just before you get to the South Pole that very kindly tells you you're almost at the South Pole, but not quite. And something I always do is I get on the sat phone and phone home. So Claire, like the Shackleton Epic, I stopped short of Stromness and phoned home. So Claire was the first person to know we'd done it. I did the same here. I stopped, phoned home, and said, "Yeah, I've made it. I'm in." And then you report to everybody, and then you walk around and then into the ceremonial South Pole, geographic South Pole. 38 days, mate. I managed to knock another 2 days off as well. So I actually hit it in 38 days, and I'm the third quickest person in history to do that in extremely bad conditions. So yeah, I was absolutely over the moon, and I did that good Royal Marine thing of stopping short, tidying myself up, making sure I looked the part, making sure I'd sort of sorted my hair out and my clothing was all nice and smart. And I marched in there like I just finished a speed march, you know, where you put your beret on and you head up and you finish in real good fit order. I didn't want anyone seeing me looking like I was struggling, and I walked in with my head held high, you know, massively proud. And yeah, it was such an amazing moment.
Brilliant. Absolutely amazing. There's so much I could talk about. I'm conscious, don't want to talk too long, Baz, because I want as many people to go, oh, this is a short one, Chris, I'll watch this before tomorrow. But yes, massive congratulations. Just a quick one. We should give Colin O'Brady a shout out before I get into the podcast. Dangerous territory, can you say? Because Colin and Lou Rudd were the first two men to cross the actual continent, Baz, wasn't it? So Baz is going to cross the ice shelves, which is from sea to sea.
Yeah.
These two gentlemen, Lou, who I was very fortunate to meet, 25-year career in the SAS, very, very nice man. Him and a chap called Colin O'Brady, on separate missions, as it were, skied across the actual continent part, so not the ice shelves. And I heard Colin went on the Joe Rogan show not that long ago because National Geographic, I think it was National Geographic, apologies if I got it wrong, they actually ran a piece on him, Baz, calling him a fraud. Saying, you're not the first person. There was this what was his name? Bergland House.
Yeah, Borg Hausland, yeah.
Borg Hausland, sorry. And Colin had to go on the Joe Rogan show and explain to National Geographic, no, this guy did it, you know, half of his trip with a kite. That's like, but again, I'm like yourself, Baz, I don't get involved in all the silly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested. There's always going to be politics and opinion and argument. I mean, I do these expeditions for my reasons. They did their expeditions for their reasons, whatever they are, whatever people's opinion is of their expeditions, etc. For me, I'm just like that. You went down and did something amazing for you, for your own reasons. Hats off. It was an incredible expedition. Well done. Well done to all of you. They're all brilliant.
Yeah.
If you want to fight and argue and chat amongst yourselves about who did what and what word means what, I don't give a toss, mate. I'm genuinely not interested, and I won't even get involved in the debate.
It's also unsportsmanship-like as well, isn't it? You know.
Well, again, mate, I don't really care, mate. People can say what they want about who they want. You know, it's a free world, but it's not a debate, and I don't have an opinion on any of it, mate. I'm just going to do what I'm doing, you know, for my own reasons. And people who know me, like yourself, will know that this isn't something I've made up in modern day time when all these arguments are coming to the fore. I put this plan down on paper 15 years ago, you know, to do this. I didn't even know about the Borg Hausland journey or about any of these expeditions at the time when I said that's what I want to go and do. And I've been planning to do that ever since. Before Frank Worsley, who sadly passed away on his crossing, before any of that, I had already publicly said I'm going to go and do this, you know, and attempt this, you know, before I even knew about all these politics and what unassisted and unsupported meant. And genuinely repeat. I don't really care what other people think.
Yeah, of course. And let's talk about the full crossing then, Baz. What are your plans there?
So I've decided I'm going to go from where Shackleton, we think, would have started, a little place called Berkner Island, which is where it's a little island on the ice shelf where it literally meets the edge of the sea. I'm going to get dropped off there by plane, back to the sea, and then march from there to the South Pole on the route very similar to what Shackleton would have taken. Up onto the polar plateau to the South Pole, and Shackleton's route would have taken him all the way out to McMurdo Sound, massive American base there now. It's where Borghausland finished and stuff like that. I'm actually going to finish my route at the Bay of Whales. I'm attempting to get to the Bay of Whales, and the Bay of Whales is a bit further up the coastline, and that's where Roald Amundsen started from when he was the first person to hit the South Pole. Only two other expeditions in history have started from the Bay of Whales to attempt to get to the South Pole. And Lou Rudd was actually one of those with Henry Worsley, and that was Lou's first major expedition where he did the Amundsen route to the pole from the Bay of Whales. And I think a couple of Norwegians started from there a few years ago. Logistically, it's just really difficult to get you there, but there's a window and there's an opportunity, and if you raise the money, then ALE, who are an amazing logistics company in Antarctica, they're still a business at the end of the day, and if you offer them enough money, they'll get you anywhere. But it's got to be planned well in advance and executed well in advance, so they can have the logistics in place to support you when you're down there. But that's the plan, mate. So Berkner Island to the Bay of Whales, and that will be a true crossing all the way, ice to ice. I think around 1,600 miles, 800 miles each leg.
Again, let's not go into it now, but below the video, friends, I will put all Baz's links for his expedition. So if you want to get involved, show your support, keep up to speed, share it all around. Unless I beat Baz to it, of course, then you'd probably want to follow me.
Absolutely, you're welcome to it, mate.
Can I borrow all your equipment?
Yeah.
I will be serious though. Obviously, as you know, I've been on an expedition to Antarctica. It is everything Baz says. It probably either gets under your skin or it doesn't. I went down there thinking it was just going to be another jolly, like I've done all around the world. I've been to some lovely places. I'm going to be honest, it was more of a tick box thing to see the seventh continent. It seemed a bit silly seeing 6 and not seeing the 7th before I died. I literally thought it was going to be a bit of ice and some penguins. How wrong was I? Not only did I do all the reading that Baz is talking about before I went, all the great polar expeditions, but even before I'd left, down there in Ushuaia in Tierra del Fuego on the southern tip, I'm just looking at it on my map now, southern tip of Argentina, you start to sense the adventure. The landscape has changed so drastically. You've got the rolling Southern Ocean there out in front of you, and the sky is threatening and forbidding. And within, I think, 2 days out from South America into the Drake Passage, you start to see icebergs floating by, and they're bigger than counties. They are huge. And without talking all about my trip, wow, Baz, I can't believe what I thought was just going to be a tick box exercise turned into the most incredible trip I've ever made.
You'll never forget. And there's something like 40,000 people visit Antarctica on cruise ships, etc. Every sort of Antarctic summer season now. So it is quite popular. But it's I recommend it to anybody, mate. It's just such an incredible part of the world.
But by the time I'd become familiar with your expedition, and then of course talking to Lou Rudd, MBE, MBE, isn't it?
MBE,
yeah. He says you still owe him a tenner, by the way, Baz.
No, I don't. just disappearing a minute.
Okay. But
Let's shout him out properly then, shall we?
yes.
There we go. I've decided I didn't want a signed copy because this, the unsigned ones will probably actually be worth a few quid in a few years. Yeah, that's why I don't want you to sign your book, mate. I don't want to ruin a good book with your signature in it.
Yeah, but when it goes on eBay, I'm confused now. But just chatting to Lou, I'll tell you what, you definitely develop a bug for wanting to at least ski to the South Pole. You just do, It
becomes addictive, doesn't it? But
that whole thing. I think because I've got a wee bit of a sense of living in the cold from my Arctic warfare training, and that thing about skiing for the day, having your routine, getting your tent up. Again, similar to when I did my John O'Groats run. I could say my bucket list is certainly got at least one thing left on it. Yes. So, Baz, I'm going to say goodbye there.
Fantastic. Great to speak to you, Chris.
Yeah, I will catch up with you tomorrow at some point.
Lovely to see you, as always.
Digging out my frickin' trainers, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, well. Yeah.
Yeah, give Jason a shout and he'll tell you where I am, mate. And lovely to see you.
Yeah, so I'm not wishing you good luck. That's not the just go and smash it like you always do.
Get on with it.
Big love to you and the family, Baz.
Thanks, mate.
Big love to everybody at home. Thank you for watching another episode of the Bought the T-Shirt podcast. If you could like and subscribe and share Baz's story and the podcast, obviously, that would be extremely kind of you. Baz, just stay on the line. Cheers, everybody. Hello, friend. I hope this finds you well. My name's Chris THRALL. I'm a former Royal Marines Commando, and I fought my way back from chronic trauma and addiction to live, work and travel in 80 countries across all 7 continents, achieving all of my dreams and goals along the way. Now I pass my simple system on to other people, but I can only help you if you like and subscribe. So please do so, because you get one life, and if you live it right, one is enough.